Okay, good morning. We're about to start Shin Nun Bet. Just a quick clarification thanks to Orach Chaim from New Jersey. In case we weren't clear or if it's misleading, the way I explained back in Shin Mem Tet, when we say someone has Dalet Amos, right? So just to clarify, now, we mentioned already, what I'm not trying to bring up right now, is we previously mentioned 4 Amos is either 4 Amos or 5.6. Generally, Stam, Shulchan Aruch, Sephardim go by 4 Amos, and Ashkenazim get 5.6, and Ashkenazim, Midarabanan, only get 4. But that's not what I wanted to bring up. What is a little confusing, we say you get 4 Amos. Now, does that mean a straight 4 Amos? Does that mean you get a circumference? You can go in every direction. Well, there's circumference, but then there's the diagonal, so forget, or the hypotenuse, so forget about that. What I meant is you get 4 in each direction, or do you get 2 in each direction?
Radius versus diameter.
What was that?
Radius versus diameter.
Radius versus diameter, but right, but not discussing the corners. Exactly. So what is your 4 Amos? So when it comes to Tchumin, we're going to see later. That's clear what the Mishnah is discussing. 4th parak of Eruvin. And it's a machlokas in the Mishnah if you get 4 in each direction, which is really 8, or do you get 2 in each direction? So normally, halacha, we're going to see, we go by 2 in each direction. But you could do 4, you could choose. You could do 4 in one direction and 0 in the other. It's like if you're stuck in a spot outside the Tchum, and you're not allowed to move in a situation if you can't move more than Dalet Amos. So that's the general rule there. We'll see. When it comes to carrying, so this is a little bit confusing or difficult to exactly quantify if everyone would agree or not. Sharat Sion points out someone who argues for Shabbos. There's a couple little discussions, but basically to keep it simple, what seems to be, according to the Mishnah Berurah, the Orach Chaim, and Pashtus, is you can only carry 4 in total. That would mean 4 in one direction and 0 in the other, or 2 in each direction. That's for carrying. By carrying, the Gemara makes a distinction over there. Daf Mem Chet, between the two. But just to explain, for carrying, in order to be an Isser of carrying Hotza'ah Dalet Amos, you have to do an Akira and a Hanacha, basically a linear distance from one to the other of Dalet Amos. So if you're going back if you start off in the middle, and then you're going back and forth, sideways, let's say 3 in one direction, 3 in the other, 3 in one and 3 in the other. So in total, that's a distance of 6. So that pashtus, if you're starting in the middle, and you're going back and forth, it'd be darabanan. Similar to the concept of carrying pachos min Dalet Amos. Because it's hard to say that would be a din d'oraisa, because you never really did an akir and hanacha in a distance of 4 from each other. But again, there is what to be mafalpel, but I just wanted to point that out. That so in that case, when you have 3 people in the row, so they point out that if you're in the middle and you want to take the same food from one side to the other, you could only max out on 2 in each side. The guy in the middle can go 4 on one side and 0 on the other, or 2 and 2. But you can't take the same food and go back and forth in an area that's greater than 4. Alright. Shin Nun Bet, once again. Hakore b'sefer nidgalgel mershus harishus. This is a person is up high, he's on a platform, on a stage, on a roof. That's what we're discussing. And Lamaisa, it doesn't usually apply nowadays with our books. We don't usually read from scrolls. We're going to see it could be Sefer Kodesh, it could be non-Sefer Kodesh. It could also be Shar Dvarim. It can apply to someone playing with a yo-yo, having a paper towels and it runs loose. It can apply to sheets and it falls down. If you're hanging it, let's say you want to shake your tablecloth outside your window. If you're on a balcony or over Rosh Hashanah or even a Carmelis. So let's see. Aleph. Hakare b'sefer ali skufa. A person is reading from a sefer and he's on a platform. This platform, we're assuming in this case, is a Rosh Hayachid. It's 4x4 and 10 high. V'nit galgel Rosh Echad mehasefer miyado. And so you hold v'nishar Rosh Hasheni biyado. So half of it, one end of whatever you're holding, or he's playing with, or discussed, whatever the situation is. So, anyways, here we're talking about Sefer Kodesh initially. So, half of it rolls down, and the other half is still in your hand. So it can't be a din daraisa. There's no problem daraisa because you only have a malacha of hotzah if the entire object is completely goes from one rishus to another or completely goes dalat amos. So here you're still holding on to it. So then you're still holding on to it. Gololo etzel afil kalgel chutz le'arba amos. It doesn't matter how far it goes. You're still holding on to one end. Roll it back up. No problem. I mean, it's a little problem, either Rabbanan, but Lamaisa, it happened, so it's not a problem. You're allowed to take it back. Vafilu, so it depends. Vafilu birshus harabim va'iskufa birshus hayachid. Even if we're talking about a deraisa, this issue of rishus hayachid to rishus harabim. So it continues, Mishum bizyon kisvei hakodesh hichiro. So we allow this to happen. This is the case of where it landed on, you're standing on a platform where people are walking. Hagad darabim darse ala iskufa. People are walking on this area. So it's a bizayon you're holding this scroll, and part of it, or if you're going to leave it there on the floor, and people walk over there. So it's a major problem. So therefore, we allow you to, the case is where we're being extra lenient, but bizayon kisei kodesh is if it landed on the floor. We'll see if it's still dangling in the air, we're much more mekel. V'davka kisvei kodesh. The only time we're mekel when we're talking about rishus hayachid to rishus harabim and it's already on the floor. So the only time we're so mekel to lift it up completely is if when you're on a platform that people walk and bizayon kisvei kodesh. Aval b'sha'ar dvarim asur afil lo naflu ela l'karmelis. But by normal items, we mentioned yo-yo, paper towel, sheets, if it's fallen onto the floor and it's resting on the floor, then we're machmer just to leave it there and not to pick it back up. Again, these are all dini derabanan here because since you're holding on to it, it's just derabanan. We're afraid that if it falls completely, then you might come to lift it up. And then lifting in these situations, if it's Rosh Hashanah is an issue d'oraisa, and for a Carmelis, we're machmer because it's already in two different Rishios, and we don't carry from a Carmelis to Rosh Hashanah, and so there still is that gzera. Okay. So I think we should continue. Now, because it's a Carmelis, there are some who are mekel even by not kisvei kodesh. Because we just mentioned, it's a little bit like a gzera. So it is a machloket achronim if you have these other items, and even if they land on the floor in a Carmelis. So Mishnah Berurah brings machlokas rishon. Okay. The machlokas achronim. So, base. Right? Base. Haya korebo. Alagag. Now, this case is you're on the rooftop. V'nitgagel rosha echad miyado. And now it falls out of your hand. So similar case, but before it's a lower platform where people are walking, it's a bigger bizayon. Here we're talking about on a rooftop, and now the scroll is basically hanging along the wall. So there's much less bizayon involved. So, as long as it doesn't reach the bottom 10 tfachim of the ground, then gololo etzlo, then you can definitely pick it up. And you can even pick it up even by shar dvarim. Any item that's hanging up in the air and you're holding on to it, even whatever the item is, doesn't have to be kisvei kodesh, you're allowed to pick it up if it's still in the air above 10.
Because it's a makom patur?
It's a makom patur, exactly. So gololo etzlo. Higia la'asar tfachim hatachtonim. Now what happens to now? It's hanging off the roof, and it's within 10 tfachim from the floor. So, im hakoto meshupa be'inyan shenach alav asur legololo etzlo u'kedei shelo yamod bebizayon hofcho al haktav. So if Now, this scenario is very uncommon. If it's dangling off the roof along a wall, but the wall is slanted and it's resting, it has to be a very big slant. It has to be slanted enough that the item is resting on the slanted roof. Again, with gravity it might roll off, but it's resting on it. And it also has to be sloped enough or flat enough that people use it to rest items on it. Otherwise it wouldn't have a din of a Rosh Hashanah. It would have a din of a wall, or a Carmelis, So therefore, it's not very common, but as long as it's less, if it's above 10, no problem. Below 10 is where it's a problem if it's going to rest a little bit on the wall. And therefore, since it's big, so therefore, if it's less than 10 in that situation, it's a problem. So we let you just leave it there. But it's not a bizayon. No one's going to step on it. It's not going to really, it's not so bad. You just turn it so that the letters are facing down. Obviously, assuming it's not going to get ruined if you turn it over facing down. So then, that's okay. V'im eino meshupa. But normally the situation off a roof is the wall is fairly straight, vertical. So then, kozman shaligil haaretz golo etzlo. As long as it doesn't touch the ground, all the way touching the ground, it's 100% mutter to pick it back up. By shar dvarim it's a machlokas, and certainly by Carmelis it's mutter. But anyway, so the Mishnah Berurah just points out the Gra, I believe he's a das yachid among the Achronim. He says once it's within 3 tfachim of the ground, then there's an isser to pull it back up. But I believe most, as long as it's a mashu above the ground, there's no problem to pull it up. Okay, Shin Nun Gimel. Dine Zizin B'Shus Harabim. So these are protrusions, little, it could be a windowsill, it could be a full balcony, porch, something coming off the side of a building. It could be large, it could be big. Aleph. Shnei batim b'shnei tzidei reshut harabim v'hem shel adam echad, o shel shnayim ve'ervu. So the case is you have, let's say, two houses next to each other along the reshut harabim. Opposite sides, exactly. Two houses that are two opposite sides they're opposite each other, the reshus harabim, and either it belongs to one person or it's two people and they made an eruv. Im shneim shavim mutar lizok mizel hazeh. So now, if they want to throw it across the reshus harabim in the air from one to another, okay. Im echad gavoa mechaver. So if you're on the same plane, the same height, you're allowed to throw from one to another, because we assume it's not too difficult. If you're on the same plane and you're going to make it, you're going to be able to throw it straight and it's going to land in the other person's side. V'im echad gavoa mechavero asur lizrok mizel hazel im ken hem klei cheres v'chayotze behem she'im yiplu yishavru. So then there's a din derabanan that if one is higher than the other, it makes it harder to throw and to land inside the other person's balcony. So then, it's usher to throw from one to another, unless we're talking about things that if they fall to the ground, they're going to break. Cheres, glass, things like that. Because if it's things that are breakable, so we say you're going to be more careful, so to make sure you aim, otherwise you wouldn't throw it, and therefore there's no gzera. Gzera is only if things are going to fall. This is if you're hanging over a reshus harabim beneath you. What are we talking about? Reshus harabim v'eres b'neihem. That's if in between you, it would land into a reshus harabim. Aval im hayta karmelit overet b'neihem mutar b'chol gavna. But if it's a karmelit, so then it's 100% mutar. It's almost like a gzera l'gzera, and we're not going to worry about it because even if it falls, you're not going to. The question is, are we going to? And you might come to carrying it. If it falls, you're going to go back downstairs and pick it up and whatever. So then you could have those issues. But if it's in a karmelit, it's a little bit like a gzera l'gzera, right? Because your intention is for it not to fall, so it would only be an isser derabanan.
But also the Mishnah Berurah says
Right, so the Mishnah Berurah points out from the Magen Avram that it's dafka if it's above 10, if you threw it from one porch to another, which is kimat every possible case. If it's above 10, because it's going through a makom patur. If you're throwing it below 10, it's probably an Isser Derabanan. He says Aser. Which is very unusual case, but yeah. Or like rolling it across, but that, okay. Okay, bet. Ziz. Now here, another platform. The Hainu Daf Habulet Minakotel Rishus Harabim. You have, on the side of your, say you have an apartment building, on the side of your building, we'll normally see this case if you call it a balcony, or a windowsill right outside, or like a little window platform right outside a window. So that's the case. We'll see. It could have walls or not have walls, depending on what scenario you come up with. But the simple case over here is there's no walls. Okay? But it's a lamala min asara. It's above 10 tfachim from the floor. V'yesh bo arba'a al arba'a. And it has an area of 4 by 4 tfachim. So if there are walls, it would be a rishus hayachid, right, or a balcony that we have, porch. But if it has no walls, it could only be a rishus harabim if there's walls. So chalon habayit patuach lo. If there's a window, we had this earlier, if you have a window from the inside of the house that leads straight or within 3 tfachim at least to this platform, it has a din of a chorei rishus hayachid. It has an extension of a hole, or like a cavity, an extension of the inside of the home, which is a rishus hayachid. So now the window extends onto the porch, or a whole doorway. It would make it, even if it didn't have 4 walls. Mishtamshin, because the house is 4 walls, even though the porch wouldn't, I'm saying, if there would be a platform or a porch without 4 walls. So then, Mishtamshim alav, you're allowed to take anything you want from inside the house to your porch, balcony, or this platform, or outside your window. Now what happens if you have 2 platforms, one above the other, right, a second floor and a third floor, one tenant on top of another, one owner on top of an owner, and so if it's 2 different people, even though they're both above 10 tfachim, so im yesh baziz ayon shel lifnei chalon rochav 4 asur lishtamish alav mipnei shehu reshut lifnei atzmo v'zi shetachta reshut acheret v'osrin ze al ze. So if you have one on top of another, even if you have a window, it's asur because they're one on top of another, and they would need to make an eruv in order to allow it, because they're one on top of another and they're owned by 2 different owners. So then you need to make an eruv in order for it not to be osir one to another. That's midinei eruvei chatzeros. Ve'im ein be'elyon arba'a.
Is that to pass from one to the other, or that's even for each one of them to go from their own house to their
So
own
I
house?
believe it's each one going to their own house. They can't even go from their own house to their own balcony if they don't make an eruv, if it's one on top of another.
So in the apartment building, we have your facade one above the other, the ocean, they are there.
You know what?
Even though they have walls, or it's just...
Yeah, so need to double check. So if there's windows that connect them to their own homes, or a door that connects them to their own home, need to double check. Good question.
Seems strange.
Yes. Haya batachton arba'a uba'elyon einbo arba'a. Now, if the bottom one is 4 by 4 and the top one is not 4 by 4, eino mishtamish be'elyon ela keneged chalono bilvad. So then, because you have one, I skipped a line. Oh, sorry. Mishtamish b'shneim, I did. Again, ve'im ein be'elyon arba'a, v'gam ein betachton arba'a. If neither of them are 4 by 4, so neither of them has its own rishus, it's not a proper makom, neither one of them is going to osir one onto the other, so mishtamish b'shneim. So then you can use both of them. Ubechol hakotel ad 10 tfachim hatachtonim. And you can, anywhere along the wall, it's not a problem, as long as you don't hit within 10 tfachim of the ground, whereas your Rishus Harabim we're talking about. Haya b'tachton arba'a ve'elyon ein b'arba'a. Now, what if you have the bottom one is 4x4, and the top balcony or platform is not 4x4, it's just a little piece of wood or a little extension. Eino mishtamish be'elyon ela keneged chalon bilvad. אבל בשאר הזה שבשני צידי החלון אסור להשתמש מפני שזה שתחתיו שחלק רשות לעצמו. So the one underneath it has, it's a full proper reshut of 4x4, and the one on the top is not. So the one on the top, one way to explain it is, it gets, basically, it doesn't have its own din of a reshus hayachid, but whatever is opposite the chalon itself, not what's on the side of the chalon, whatever is opposite the chalon itself, that still gets the din of a chorei rishus hayachid, so that person could carry from his into there, but he cannot carry from his inside his house through his window to the side, unless it would have been a full 4x4. Okay. Let's see. Did we finish Bet? Yeah. Mishnah Berurah points out one important thing, that if you, we're talking about, Asur Lishtamish was going on Yud Aleph, that uppercase. When you have one on top of another, right? Oops. What was that? No, doesn't matter. Okay. I'll just tell you that it's from Siv Katin Aleph. Dafka bekelim sheshavtu b'toch habayit. So it's only a problem to carry if one of the homes is osir onto another home. It's a problem to carry from inside of your house to outside to your balcony if the two balconies become usher to each other. But whatever was left on the balcony, bein hashmashos, so that's, you're allowed to carry it in the balcony. And if the case, I think was, yeah, okay, so we'll leave it like that.
It doesn't have walls. It's hard to say it's a balcony. It's a shelf.
Correct.
It has walls. It must be like part of your house. You're not also your apartment because you're on top of somebody else.
Right. Okay, good point. So in our cases, double check, but with our cases of a house, with the apartments, when you have a proper balcony with proper walls, probably there's no problem to have one on top of another without making an error, you're saying. Okay, we'll double check. But that sounds like a good distinction. Here we're talking about these protrusions that are like a porch, or they're a shelf. It has no railing all the way around. Okay. Gimel. Kol ziz hayotzei al avir rishus harabim. Okay, so now any of these protrusions, right, that are hanging over a rishus harabim, shemutar lishtamesh alav, when we say you're allowed to use them from inside to outside, keshu mishtamish bo einotin alav einotin mimenu ela kli cheres is chuchit uchayotzei behem. So here we're talking about there's no walls, it's just a protrusion, and things can fall off. Right? So he says you're only allowed to put things there that are things that are valuable, or things that are not going to break. That's what it is. Things that not lav dafka valuable, things that you're afraid you don't want them to break because they are breakable. That if they fall down, they're going to break. Shar kelim asurim, but other kelim are asur, things that are non-breakable. Shema yiplu l'rishus harabim v'yavi'im. So then, if it's a protrusion, a shelf that's over a rishus harabim, which is deraisa, so then you can't put anything there that might fall off if it's not breakable. The dafka zizu chayotzebo, but that's only by just a little shelf. But if it's a shelf that's huge, a big shelf that you can stand on, it doesn't have to be so big, but enough to be able to stand on there. Shemishtamesh omed sham im hakli, that you could stand there with a kli, then mutar lishtamesh b'chol hakelim. Then it's not a problem because we're not afraid it's going to fall off. It's not so narrow, it's not so small. V'im hayaziz echad lavada yotze alav karmelis. And if you have one ziz and it's overhanging a carmelis, which is usually the situation, but again it depends where you are. So if it's a onesie, so you don't have to worry about eruvin, as one owner, onesies, you don't have to worry about eruvin, and it's a carmelis. Kol shu gavoh asar le'olam mutter. As long as it's above 10, it's always going to be a mutter. If you carry from your window, inside and outside, it's either a makom patur, or choy rishus yachid, bein rachav, bein katzar, big or small, v'afilu kelim she'en mishtavrim, even if it's things that don't break, we don't have to worry about it. Shelo gazru bekarmelit. It was over a carmelit, they didn't make any of these type of Gzeros. Makom patur for sure is mutter. If it's over a makom patur, but it's very hard to have the ground a makom patur because it's less than 4x4. But yeah, okay. I think we'll just stop.
Sure. How do you have this place here?